people buy the wrong franchise. They didn't do the wrong things. They just didn't do what they needed to do completely. The franchise buying process has commercial incentives for both the buyer and the seller. Everybody wants it to work well, and there's the franchisor's point of view and there's the franchisee's point of view.
Yep.
It's a long-term relationship, and it's like a marriage. It's a relationship between two parties. I'm Julie Taylor.
And I'm Belinda Bradley.
And this is the Human in Franchising podcast. In the deciding stages of the relationship, you've got franchisors trying to look good in the eyes of the franchisee, and you've got the franchisee trying to be on their best behavior to make this work.
Mm-hmm.
I think, it's got to be a balance between the franchisee coming in and saying, hey, can I have a look at your franchise? I'm thinking about buying one. And but they forget that the franchisor on the other side is thinking, well, hang on a minute, I might not want you in my franchise. I want this to look good, but I
wonder if we shouldn't just also redefine what this relationship is all about and the two parties involved. So where you've got the franchisor, who is the owner of the intellectual property,
yes,
they have already run a pilot operation. They understand what goes on. They have a blueprint that works. It's been tried and it's been tested. They've got operations manuals that have come from their pilot operation, and they sell a franchise. What they're actually selling is the rights to access the blueprint to another party. In this case, that's the franchisee. So the franchisee buys access to this to this blueprint.
Well, hang on a minute, because one of the things that you hear a lot in franchising is franchises are awarded, not sold. So when and this is where it's interesting, because franchisees come along and they think, well, I'm paying you good money. I'm buying your franchise and I'm helping you to build your brand. And the franchisors say, no, hang on a minute. I'll decide whether you're coming into my franchise or not. I will award franchise to the right people. That's how it should work. Doesn't always, but that's how it should work.
But going back to that dynamic between there's two different responsibilities. You've got one who owns intellectual property and who decides how that intellectual property is used and who can use it. And then you've got somebody who comes in and wants to buy the blueprint because it is a faster way to making money.
Oh, absolutely.
The brand is already established. The methodologies are already established. It's a faster track to making money. I sometimes heard it being described as like taking a toll road. But both roads, the original road and the toll road, will both get you to a destination, but the toll road has a bit of help along the way. It's a slightly smoother ride. And it'll get you there a little faster, but the destination is the same. And franchising is a bit like that.
Yeah.
You don't have to buy a franchise. You can go and open your own business and figure it out yourself. But if you want to buy a franchise, that comes with some rules and regulations in order for it, in order to not guarantee its success, because it's not guaranteed, but in order to ensure consistency across a network, there are some rules that have to be applied. The franchisor is the party that decides what those rules are. The franchisee coming in who is awarded that franchise needs to be prepared to work according to those rules.
Absolutely.
For that, they pay an initial fee when they come in, a franchise fee, and they pay to set up their business, which they would have had to pay whether they were setting up their own business. And they pay an ongoing royalty or management services fee, as it's commonly known. And what is that for? That's paid because they continually access the blueprint that makes them money. And that's the franchisor's income stream, because he reinvests that into the support network, into the research and development, all the areas of responsibility that are the franchisor's. The franchisee's responsibilities are to follow the blueprint and to stick to the guidelines, that are underpinned in the franchise agreement, which is the agreement that regulates and that keeps control over this relationship.
I think what also needs to be clear to franchisees when they come in is, yeah, okay, you're coming in and you're going to have somebody to create this blueprint, or they've created this blueprint, and you are going to now follow that blueprint. But they forget that the franchisor needs to make a profit as well, because this is where he's earning his money.
Yeah.
So when you come in and you think, well, why should I pay the franchisee 5% of everything I make, or 10 or 15 or whatever the percentage is? You've got to establish and be very clear about, what am I getting for my money when I'm paying you 5% of everything, or 10% of everything? What do I get? You get the rights to use the group, to continue to use the blueprint. You get the support from the franchisor.
Yes.
And you've got the community that you're joining that is a useful community in terms of everybody doing the same thing.
And you've got access to a blueprint that will fast track you to profitability, rather than you figuring everything out yourself.
That's right. One of the analogies, your toll road analogy, is quite interesting, actually, because one of the analogies that I use is, if you start your own business, and if you and I've done it, I've been in a room full of people they're all business owners, and you say to them, right, okay, so everybody who owns a business in this room, put your hand up if you've never had a problem in the first 3 years. And of course, nobody puts your hand up. You have the clever so-and-so who puts their hand up. But in the main, nobody puts their hand up, because they've all had problems. What the franchisor's created with his blueprint is a point where, after that 3 years, they've had all the problems, they've walked through the mud, and now you're buying in at a point where you're not going to have those problems. So you can grow faster than the franchisor did in the first place.
Yeah, I think it's the heavy lifting's being done,
Yeah,
hasn't
absolutely.
it? So there we are. Yeah.
So some clarity around that
And
is really good.
Good understanding of what the roles and responsibilities are in this relationship. There are two parties. They've each got a defined role to play, and everybody each party understanding the part that they've got to play in it.
Yeah.
Is a sure way to success down the line. When you're not clear on it, and that's never been explained, one starts to wonder, why should I pay fees? Why should I do this? Why should I do that? So
So the clarity needs to be there.
Absolutely does.
You've seen, I've worked predominantly in the UK market, but you've seen other markets, and
Yes.
so talk a little bit, Belinda, about what you've seen in other markets that are more regulated than the UK.
Yeah, well, the UK franchise market is not a regulated market. So that means there is no specific law that governs franchising. There are a few best practices, but that's what they remain. And franchise associations like the BFA will have a code of conduct, and they will have some best practices, which generally are founded in international franchise associations around the world. So it's an international best practice that's adopted by individual countries, but there's no law that governs how franchising must be operated in the UK. In other countries around the world, it is more regulated. And so you find that in the US, for example, every single one of the states has its own regulations around franchising. South Africa has their own regulations around franchising. Australia is regulated. There are parts of Europe that are regulated as well. And what that generally means is that franchising is governed by certain laws that require franchisors to behave in a certain way and to disclose certain amounts of information, and that varies from country to country. In the UK, there is no requirement to disclose anything. So it's really, the onus is on the buyer to ask the right questions and to do their due diligence and to come to a decision. And so, one could argue that's good or bad. It just means that franchisors can, have no sort of a resistance in setting themselves up.
We do, but then you've also got to think, in the UK, we've got contract law and we've got retail laws that govern how businesses work. So there is some sort of adjudication, if you like, but you've got to. It's in with other businesses and other things, but it is there.
Yes.
So you've got to understand that that's where you're coming from. I think one of the things that we've found, especially in this age of AI,
Mm-hmm.
you go to you go to ChatGPT or whatever it is, and you're going to do some research, and then they come to us and say, "I want to know what your top franchisee is earning, and I want to know what your FDD looks like."
Yes.
They don't
Yes.
know what an FDD is,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you can't tell them what the top franchisee is earning because it's you're contravening the
PR
GDPR
laws. Yeah.
laws.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what kind of thing what does that do in terms of making the buyer feel uncomfortable that you're not telling them everything that they think they need or should know?
I think, look, buyers, you know, come in and have to do their own due diligence. The onus is on them, and to properly educate themselves before they enter into a market such as this. And so that part of it is the onus is on the buyer to do that.
Mm,
And certainly, if you're going to make a sizable investment, which a lot of franchises require, then you owe it to yourself to do that. To do that homework properly, right?
absolutely,
And to
absolutely.
become a little bit more educated on the sector that you're going to enter. But just to go back to the sort of franchise disclosure document, which is very much a US requirement,
Mm,
and it has various names in other countries. South Africa, they call it just a straight disclosure document. Australia have their own version of that, and there's various other ones in Europe as well. And there are specific legal requirements about what must be contained, how many franchisees, who they were, the financial status of the franchisor needs to be disclosed. Even in some countries, even as far down as the detail of who what the contact details of these
mm,
franchisees, even the ones who've closed down and are no longer or may have sold and moved on. That is not a requirement in the UK. So you're not going to find UK franchisors with FDDs. The closest you might come is a franchisor having a FIM, FIM. That is a franchise information memorandum. It's best practice with most good consultants that when they are assisting a client to franchise their business, that a FIM will be drawn up, because it is the document that will inform solicitors when the franchise agreement is drawn up. So it is pretty much like a cross between a sales document and a business plan. And
mm,
it contains certain information. And certainly it should contain the information that if anybody who was reading that document was going to use it to come to a decision about whether they would like to buy into this franchise, whether they'd like to consider it, there should be enough information in that FIM for them to be able to arrive at
mm,
that conclusion,
yeah.
that's what it is. And
And of
certainly that's
course,
what the disclosure documents are about.
yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
of course, all of our clients have a
Yes,
FIM.
yes. All our consulting clients,
That's
we build that in, because it's just a case of, beginning with the end in mind. A lot of clients then want to eventually expand their franchises
mm,
internationally. And then if you haven't built the foundations right, it's difficult later on
it's
to
difficult to do
evolve
it.
into disclosure documents where those are requirements in other
Mm,
countries.
mm,
So, what we find though is when people are doing their research on AI is that they are being, US law is being referenced. And
yeah,
so there's
yeah,
not a lot of, if you don't have the insight into what is available, and what should be done in the UK, very often you're looking for things that don't exist in this market. And
yeah,
that's the,
yeah,
that's the issue with not knowing what questions to ask AI and not being able to discern the information that comes back at you.
yeah,
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 yeah, yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. It's yeah, it's really important. I think one of the things that the part of the reason why we set this podcast up in the first place,
Yes,
and the collective that we've done as well, is to educate buyers, to
absolutely.
get them to
Yeah,
understand
yeah,
what they need to know before they go and throw themselves into buying a business that maybe isn't going to suit what
absolutely.
what what
Yeah.
they should be doing. So it's important that
This is
due
all about
diligence is
education,
done.
and that's our mission, isn't it, Julie? Runo franchising, franchise energetics was developed so that we made sure people walked into situations with their eyes open, and that
Mm.
and that the proper amount of information, the real questions that should be asked, and
Are
aligning
asked.
the person, the human being, with the actual transaction and the actual container of franchising,
Mm.
that alignment was in place. So yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, education is where it starts, and certainly in 35 years of doing this, where it's gone horribly wrong, where I've seen that happen, very often people will say things, if only I knew then what I know now,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just sad because actually that information exists. It's just about uncovering it and knowing where to go to find the information. And so people are in the right place here because this is what we're sharing.
Well, our franchise fit matrix has the elements of that, doesn't it?
It
So
does.
we've got in the matrix actually, you can download a guide that has part of our franchise fit matrix in it, but it's got financial readiness. It talks about operational capabilities. It talks about lifestyle compatibility.
Yeah,
It talks about relationship readiness and long-term commitment. So they're
absolutely.
all kind of in there in part. That is what you need to be sure about when you're doing your due diligence.
Absolutely.
Let's start with the financial readiness
Mm-hmm.
question.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think that lies, Belinda?
Well, there's two parts to that. I mean, there is the part about being able to afford the franchise, what it's going to cost. There are fees involved. There's normally an upfront fee or a franchise fee, as it's known in the UK. That is the money that is generally paid to the franchisor if they're not running a turnkey operation. Turnkey just means the franchisor takes care of the whole setup versus a franchisor that allows the franchisee to take care of part of the
Part of the
setup.
setup.
So there's no right or wrong. It's
Mm.
just a choice and what some franchisors implement in their businesses. And certainly the bigger, more well-established franchisors run turnkey operations, and the more emerging ones allow a little bit more leeway when
Mm.
it comes to setup. While not diverting from brand specifications and things like
Mm.
that.
Mm.
So financial readiness is certainly looking at, do you have the money to set it up? Have you sort of worked out what it's going to be versus what money are you going to make out of the business?
But there's also the other element. What's it going to cost you to set it up? But also, what do you need in place to run it
Yeah,
until such time as
yeah,
it starts to break
make even.
even?
Yeah. So
So you need
understanding the
what's
financials.
called working capital, because
Yes.
you've got to put that into place as well.
Yeah.
It's no good setting it all up and then running out of money in month 6 because your numbers didn't quite work,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you've not got enough in
Or
there.
then being, sort of relying on the business to pay you a salary that's the equivalent of your corporate position.
Yeah,
Because you need to live and you've got a
yeah.
lifestyle and you've got, things you can't give up
Mm.
at a certain stage. And so that financial readiness has to also be considered. Can the
Yeah.
business actually afford you? So when one looks at what returns look like on businesses, you've got to look at it what it would normally pay a manager to run firstly,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
are you able to sort of downscale? Are you able to support
Can you live
yourself?
on that
Can you live on
wage?
that
Yeah,
wage? Yes.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
at what stage, and what goals are in place for you to achieve the financial milestones, that will enable you to
Mm.
eventually have, and enjoy the fruits of your
Of your
labor and
labour.
and all the profits and what have you.
Yeah.
But there's normally some sort of alignment in terms of financial readiness that has to be looked at there, in
Mm.
terms of what the business can afford
And
as
that
salaries.
kind of fits with our second one, which is operational capability. You know, you've got to understand what the operation is capable of delivering
Yes,
and what you're capable of understanding
yes,
about the blueprint that you're working within and the
yeah,
model that you're
yeah,
working within. And if you haven't got clarity on that and you don't align yourself with what's necessary to be done, then what's going to be, do you think, the impact of not being fully aligned with it and not having the financial or um, the operational capability? What's the impact on your turnover and your profit in,
yeah.
let's say, year 2?
Well, I think in terms of, operational, alignment there, operational capabilities, it's really understanding how the money moves around in the business. Because every action results in a transaction.
Mm.
And so all those actions that the franchisor is going to be teaching you in training courses, for
Mm.
example,
Yeah.
methodologies that should be adopted, kitchen flows if you're in a food franchise, for example, how to do sales calls if you're in a service type business and when you should do those. All those things have been mapped because they contribute to a level of success in the business and achieving certain milestones. So it's understanding that, and at what point are the milestones, and what is your part in that? So, operationally, if you're in a food sector, for example, a big sort of one of the points that you really need to be looking at almost every day is looking at stock usage versus sales. It's it's the thing that will affect. It's the biggest chunk of expenses in the business is the food cost. And if the food cost is not being managed, and it has to be managed at store level, the franchisor can't manage that. So they can set prices from central kitchens, etc., etc. But the actual management of that happens in store operationally. It's all those actions that happen operationally that can impact directly that
and that's not just in
milestone.
That's not just in things like food or retail. It also translates into, if you've got a domiciliary care franchise or a
Absolutely.
cleaning franchise or a
Yep.
consultancy, or,
Yep.
because your dominant product then is time.
Absolutely. Managing the time is so incredibly important. How much time is being allocated to sales, for example, and executing on the business. So it's really understanding what drives the money in the business and where do you have to focus on. And in a lot of more retail aligned businesses, you're going to have things like point of sale systems, for example, which are going to track all the numbers for you. Well, if your manager knows more about what goes into that POS than you do, you've got a problem. Yes.
Yeah.
So you can't be relying on things like, for example, well, I'll put video cameras up to watch what people are doing. For every hour your camera is recording, you've got to have an hour to watch the video, in which case you might as well be there. So, as far as that's concerned, the numbers will tell the story if you're properly and correctly tracking them. Yes.
Yeah.
And so things like your point of sale system that has reporting features, you'll be well advised to learn that properly, understand it, make that part of your daily reconciliation process, and do that every day. Because to find out at the end of the month that you've got big shortages on certain elements of your business is almost useless. What are you going to do about it on day 30 when the problem originated on day 2 and you did nothing about it? So you're already a month into the problem, and you're probably going to start the next month with that same problem. So it is really about understanding where the controls are in the business, the tracking is, and that's very much an operational point of view. And it's not something that is always thought about.
Yeah, no.
Like what you actually have to do. What are those actions?
And you've got to understand that we're going back to the blueprint again.
Absolutely.
That the blueprint is a structure.
Yeah.
And that structure is there, and the systems and processes around that are structured to enable you to make money.
Yes.
And
yes.
And obviously the franchisor wants to make money as well.
Yes.
So it's in the franchisor's interest.
Yes.
For you to follow that blueprint and for you to make money, which is all, so it's
to convey that message also to the staff, because very often, there's a load of rules and regulations, and you've got to do this and you mustn't do that, and stand like this and wear that shirt and put this in that box and fold the packet like this. And there's a whole lot of methodologies that go around, but generally speaking, every one of those methodologies and procedures, policies and procedures in the business have been designed so that you can properly execute on marketing messages that are national or global messages, that you can deliver consistency, because when you deliver consistency, you attract more clients. Clients know what they're going to get. They know every time they come, they're going to get a certain thing. And so those actions that have been written into policies and procedures are really contributing to overall success. So that sometimes you've got to explain to staff why and how, and you've got to be on them. It's managing a teams of people to be able to execute on the operation is no mean feat. That requires a bit of skill.
If it is a franchise where you are employing people,
yes, exactly.
You've got to either learn very quickly to be a good leader or have those leadership skills to start with.
Yes.
And that kind of starts to come into the next dimension, which is lifestyle capabilities. Because if the lifestyle that you need from this determines that you need to be a leader of a team,
Yeah.
for example,
Yeah.
or, a leader of people, then you've got to understand how that's going to fit into
Yeah.
the whole dynamics of the business. If the blueprint is just for one person
Mhm.
out there driving a van and being on their own all day,
Yeah.
that's absolutely fine. But then again, the lifestyle compatibility falls into that,
Mhm.
because if you are going to be out in a van all day
Mhm.
and your area is too big, you're driving too far, your time is spent driving rather than delivering the product or the service that you're offering,
Yeah.
then that's a different problem altogether.
Yeah, it leads me also back to those more retail type outlets because, the operational hours in retail and in fast food and in restaurants, for example, are not always hours um, that are easy to deal with. If you're a family person, if you've got
Mm,
responsibilities at
mm.
homes, you're often busy at times of the day, which are at night or, weekends, for example,
Weekends.
Friday evenings, that kind of thing. And that's your opportunity to affect the most amount of customers because that's
Yes.
when you're busiest. So not
Yes.
to be there, not to make sure that your business is running optimally at that time when you've got the opportunity to influence so many people. You can imagine if the opposite was true. If it was going wrong, you weren't there, people weren't being served properly, you're affecting the biggest chunk of people coming
Yeah.
through, your biggest
Yeah.
customer base.
Yeah.
So your lifestyle and what you're prepared to do, if you're not prepared to do the hours that the business requires of you,
Mm,
or travel the miles that it might require of you, or whatever the case might be,
mm.
um, then sometimes that's overlooked. So
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
element, this dimension,
Yeah.
is a very, very important one because it can lead to misalignment.
And that's why some franchisors will insist that you actually live in the area where your
Yes,
business is running, so
yes,
so that you're not disjointed from it. In fact, at the moment, I'm in the middle of writing our um, territory territory intelligence um, guide for our
yes.
masterclass, and so I've got very prevalent in my mind at the moment the fact that if you've franchisors very often in and franchisees will want big territories to encourage people into the franchise. And that's not always good because,
No.
from the franchisee's point of view, you've got this huge territory
Mhm.
that your territory is that size,
Yeah, yeah,
and for those of you that are listening, sorry, but your territory is big and the area that you're covering within that is tiny.
yes,
Then you've got this whole area where the brand's not being exposed to
yeah.
the customers there,
Mhm.
and so you're limiting the brand.
Yeah.
So, but franchisees think, "Oh, I want lots and lots of people and lots of, whatever it is that you need in an
Mm.
area,"
Mhm.
and that's not always the best
No,
thing
no, it's not.
for either person. And from a franchisee particularly, if you've got to spend hours in the car driving to your customers because you've got this huge area, then the effect of your business is going to show very
Absolutely,
quickly.
absolutely.
So again, that's kind of structure and lifestyle stuff because you're going to come home absolutely shattered at the end of
Mm.
the day and you haven't really done much. Whereas if you structured it
Yeah,
better and followed the blueprint on a smaller space, then you'd be
yeah.
in a better place. What about the aspect of relationship readiness?
Well, certainly, you've got relationships at home, that are responsibilities that you have towards the relationships at home. Do you have the support structure around you? Running or starting any new business is no mean feat for anybody, let me
Yeah.
tell you. So whether it's your own independent or a franchise, it comes with a lot of responsibility. It's going to require a certain level of dedication and commitment, and your support structure, your family support around you, is hugely important, and your activities are going to impact on them. So, when making a decision about buying a franchise, certainly you need to look to that support structure, make sure they're involved in the decision making process, and that everybody understands what it's going to take and require in terms of commitment
Mm.
from certainly the franchisee.
Yeah, yeah,
And certainly for the
absolutely.
first period of time, any business takes a while to get to its peak points, and so it may not be like that forever. But certainly in those early days when you're nurturing a business and you're growing a business, it does take time and dedication, really.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm, mm. And even when you're coming into a franchise where you've got the blueprint, and yes, you haven't trawled through the mud, or you've taken the toll road rather than the other
Y-
road, or the analogies we've used.
yes,
You've still got to be dedicated and spend a lot of time in that business to
yeah,
get it off the ground
absolutely.
at that stage as
Yeah,
well. So the the dedication there and understanding what it is you want to achieve at the end of it
yeah,
is really, really important in terms of your lifestyle compatibility and your relationship readiness, because the whole
yeah,
thing's
yeah,
got to be
yeah.
taken into account.
I think when you look at the level of investment that it requires to start any business, but certainly in a franchise, it's often the biggest investment people make, or very close to the
Mm.
biggest investment people make. And I've heard it said before, if you're not prepared to sort of nurture that investment, because that's the role you're taking
Mm,
on, is
mm,
nurturing your own
mm.
investment according to a plan that you put together
That you put
originally.
together.
Um, I've often heard it said, "Well, I'll just put a manager in place,
Mm,
and that'll solve a few problems." It was once said to me, and it made a lot of sense. If you took the same amount of money that you're about to invest in the franchise or in the business, whatever it is that you're buying, and you bought a motor vehicle for the same value, would you give the keys to the manager to drive? And
yeah. Yeah.
most business owners would
Would
say,
say no,
absolutely not.
no.
I don't know that I would trust anybody to do
Mm,
that. And so think about that in terms of the investment and who you allocate and delegate to,
mm,
and what checks and balances you've got in place, in terms of certainly if you've got your family around you and the family are involved in the business,
mm,
the other thing you've got to look after is the family relationship,
mm.
because it is a business primarily, and families, need to be prepared to take
And
on their
again,
roles in that business.
what do you and your family want from this business? What's
Yes,
the end game? Where are you
yes,
going with this? And you need to, I always think, an important thing is to start the business with the end in mind. What
absolutely.
is it that you
Yeah.
want to get from that?
Sure, sure. But to also, if you are going to embark on a family-run business, the relationships will be impacted from a point of from a business point of view,
Mm, mm,
and having those awkward conversations ahead of time. Who's going to make the decisions?
mm.
Is everybody comfortable with what might have to happen here?
Yeah.
So before you start, delegate the roles out as though you were employing people you didn't know,
Yeah.
and just make sure
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah.
understands that. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I think I just wanted to share a story, really, at this stage,
Okay.
which really describes a franchisee I encountered many, many years ago in my early, early days in franchising in the fast food sector.
Back in
And
South Africa,
back in
or?
South Africa,
Mm,
yes, yes, in KwaZulu-Natal, in Durban.
mm,
And he bought a franchise, a fried chicken franchise, and he got into it. He understood what his part was. He attended the training. Very, very good brand, second biggest in the country
mm,
at that stage, and had a very good site. So location was all good. But what he did really, really well was he understood what his end game was.
mm.
So he went into it knowing that at some stage he wanted to sell out. And
Yeah.
he wanted to sell out at the point at which he had accumulated enough money and profit, from the business, um, that would allow him to, travel the world on his Harley Davidson. That was his dream. 2.5 year trip. He planned the whole thing out. He knew where he was going. He knew what it was going to cost him, and he knew what that number was, what he needed to achieve.
Mm,
He knew also that it wasn't going to be possible out of one store. It was never
mm,
going to be
mm,
possible out of one store. So when he made his decision about buying the business, he knew what the business was going to require of him and his input on a daily basis. Back in those days, there were not even cell phones. So, mobile phones
yeah.
didn't exist. So everything was done quite primitively.
Did
If
you
one
know how
looks at
many
it,
stores he needed?
he did. Well, he had worked it out. He knew it was going to be somewhere between 10 and 12,
Mm,
and he knew that it was going to take him somewhere between 8 and 10 years to achieve. So he was going to have to build a store up, use that as leverage to get the second store, use that as leverage to get the third store. He came into the franchise in the early days, so there was still really a lot of really good sites. He proved himself to the franchisor, which was great. So the franchisor was very happy for him to become a multi-branch operator, which
that's quite a big thing,
which is a
isn't
big
it?
thing, because you're not now dealing with one business. If one business takes 100% of your focus and now you've got two, if they're not running optimally, you've diluted it 50%. So,
Absolutely.
and the same goes when you go beyond that. So you can imagine for 12, it's quite an operation. Anyway, he kind of knew what he had to do. He had very good management teams in each of the businesses. He was there every day. So he visited all the stores every single day. He checked the milestones. He checked the KPIs. He knew how the money moved around. And so he had checks and balances all the way that he would go and check. He never just took a stock take for granted. So if somebody had said we'd counted the stock, in case they were rolling stock, he would go in and do spot checks on that stock. So he knew exactly, where the loopholes were, and he made sure that the bucket that was catching all the money didn't have any holes in it. So that was a job he found. So he kind of made it his mission very early on to know what he didn't know. He had to learn.
That's a big
He had to learn that.
That's a big.
And he was prepared to take that on. So in the training process, all of that was revealed. Well, like, this is what you've got to do every day to make this a success. He understood that was going to take a lot of time and dedication, but he said, I'm going to give myself a certain period of time, and I'm prepared to do what's got to be done, because that's my dream. That's where I'm going to cash out. And, to be honest, Julie, he did. He sold out after 12 stores. He accumulated a massive money. He was
How
able
long
to,
did it take him to do it?
it was about 8 or 9 years. It
All
was,
right.
yeah,
So
it was.
yeah.
He was able to achieve it,
Yeah.
and he was able to do, live his dream, do the Harley trip, come back, buy himself a really, really beautiful home overlooking the Indian Ocean on the East Coast, and set up his import-export business, which he kind of still runs today, and live the life, basically. Met his lovely wife in Brazil on his travels, and they've lived happily ever after. So it was a story that had a really, really happy ending, but it really had that happy ending because he made it his mission to understand the part he had to play, and he acted on it. He didn't relent on it at all.
Yeah.
And that's important. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it is. It is. So the next one is long-term commitment.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think, I said earlier that one of the things that you can one of the analogies that you can use with this is it's a bit like a marriage.
Yes.
You're coming into it, you've got to at least like the person,
Absolutely.
one would hope.
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So you've got to trust in that there's this two-way dynamic that's going to allow you to build your business under the umbrella of the
A meeting of
franchisor.
minds, almost.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
So when you start talking to and doing your due diligence around, is this the right franchise for me? You've got to look at whether you like the franchisor, whether you like his ethics, whether you understand the culture of the business and the structure of it.
Yeah.
Talking to franchisees is really important. But if you've got franchisees that are in a different place to you, don't just assume that just because they're not making loads of money, they're not the top franchisee, that they're not meeting their goals, and they're not aligned with what they're doing. Because if they, let's say, for example, you've got somebody who comes in, they want their own business because they've got a job, highfalutin job, they're getting paid a lot of money, they don't really care now how much they get paid. They want to see their kids grow up. They want to take the kids to school. They want to see the school plays and things like that. So they're not making as much money as maybe somebody whose goals are different to them.
Yes.
But they feel that they are really successful. The franchisor's happy because they're doing what they want. They're making a profit. He's making money or she's making money. And it's a big thing. So you've kind of got to go into it in terms of understanding what your goal is to get out of this. So your due diligence is massive in terms of making sure that you you're getting the right information.
Yeah.
But you've also got to think that this is a long-term thing. So you're not just coming into this for a couple of years.
No.
You're generally coming into this, I mean, with some of the bigger ones, you're coming into for 10 or 20 years
Exactly.
contract.
Yeah.
You know,
Absolutely.
generally in the UK, it's around 5, 7. I think some of them are moving up a little bit, but
Yeah.
it's a long-term commitment. So the marriage part is great.
Yeah.
But the divorce part is really ugly and really expensive.
And rather messy.
If you're trying to get out of it at a
Yes.
point when, you know, you're only part the way down there. So
Yeah.
you need to make sure that you've done all of your due diligence, not just on the territory, which is massive, but on the business itself. But just because you've done everything right doesn't mean that you're there, because you've got this readiness within the sort of relationship readiness and the long-term thing that you need to understand. And the best way I can explain it is, we had a franchisee, this is a long time ago, and he'd done everything. We knew he'd got the money. He'd spoken to a solicitor about his franchise agreement. All of the things that we told him to do, he'd done his territory research, which is, you know, really important. He'd got the shop set up. Everything was ready. He'd done the training, and he'd done really well in the training as well.
Yeah.
Came to the day when he got to, you know, this is great, we're going to start trading.
Yeah.
He couldn't unlock the door.
Oh, my word.
He just sat there. He could not unlock that door. And he never did. He didn't unlock it. And that is so sad, because if he'd asked the right questions and been asked the right questions,
Yes.
then, you know, you've kind of got double trouble, because he's spent a lot of money and he's never going to run this business. But the franchisor now has a shop in an area where they've advertised that this is going to open.
Yeah.
And it doesn't. So it's a brand damage as well. So
Absolutely.
so you've kind of got this real, you know, if he'd been asked the right questions. And I have to say, hand on heart, you know, in my early days of recruiting franchisees, I sometimes didn't ask the right questions either.
Yeah.
And I was under pressure to get a certain amount of franchises in the year or whatever, because the franchisor was growing the brand. And sometimes mistakes were made.
Yeah.
Now, with the way that we're doing it, we are being very careful about making sure that people are aligned with the brand, that they understand what's going to happen, they're doing their due diligence, we make sure their financial readiness is right, and as best we can.
And that they're right, and that they are prepared for what's coming.
Yes.
So that they don't get into a situation like you've just described,
Yeah.
where, you know, a whole lot of limiting beliefs and self-belief gets in the way of being able to take the next step, for sure.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely. So there are certain things that I look for now when I'm recruiting.
Yeah.
And I know that you're teaching this with people that we're talking to when they want to franchise their business.
Yes.
Is sort of, you know, are you clear about what you want to do?
Yes.
How you're going to do it, and what's expected of you? What's your part that you're going to play?
Yeah.
What's the part that the franchisor plays? What's the part that everybody else plays in this?
Yes.
And there's got to be some real clarity around that. You've got to be aligned with what you want to buy, like your Harley Davidson man. He knew what he was buying. You've got to like and trust the brand. You've got to like and trust the franchisor. You're going to be working together for a while, and you've got to feel comfortable within the culture of the business is really important.
And the product and service.
And
as
the
well.
product and service. If you don't like the product, I had a guy the other day actually, who said to me, he was looking at this particular business. I won't say what it was. And he'd been exploring it, and the figures were right, and he could have the area he wanted, and it was all there.
Yeah.
But he didn't like the product. And I said to him, how can you buy a business and not like the product?
Yeah, he just didn't believe in it.
Well, you're not aligned with it. There's no alignment there at all, because he didn't like the taste. It was a food, and he didn't like the taste. So, you know, how can you go say, oh, look, I've got this great business, but I don't like it.
Yeah.
So So, you've got to look at the structure of the business. Does it fit with your lifestyle? Do you understand what's coming? As you said earlier, Belinda, the hours.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
if you've got to work evenings and weekends,
Mm-hmm.
but you want to take the kids to football and parties and everything else in the evenings and weekends,
Yeah.
you're not going to go into your business. And that is really going to show in year 2. That will show.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because you'll start to have this problem where you're not dedicating enough time to the business. So it will very quickly start to
The
show.
consequences of not doing what's required show, and they come through very clear. And normally in the year 2, sort of when you think, well, why am I not making it that much? I'm not doing the numbers I'm supposed to be doing. It goes back to those actions, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Are
it
you
does.
doing the
You're doing
actions
the
that drive
actions.
the numbers?
Yeah.
Those kinds of
And
things.
activating everything that you
Yes.
can. So the activation
Yes.
comes around your activation in terms of activating the skills that you need to have, learning the skills that you need to have, but also following the blueprint, activating the marketing, doing the recruitment, making sure that you're bringing in enough customers, whatever it is you're doing, recruiting staff.
Yes.
So
and managing staff.
And managing staff, managing them as well. So all of that needs to come into it. And that kind of looks then at sustainability for everybody.
Yes.
So sustainability for you as a franchisee in terms of, you're going to start this business, it's got to succeed. The franchisor wants you to succeed. So he's looking for sustainability and he's looking for sustainability across the brand.
Yes.
And what part as a franchisee do you play in that, in making sure that brand is sustainable?
It's a whole ecosystem, isn't it?
It is, yeah,
And so
it is.
for a franchise to really flourish, and all the big well-known ones that we all know, they're based on a couple of principles. Consistency is one of them.
Yes, yeah,
They need
absolutely.
to be, product and service and all the rest of it needs to be consistently applied. You need to, franchisees, all branches and franchises need to consistently deliver on marketing messages so that the customer base is there,
Yeah.
So consistency is everything, in terms of franchising. If you don't get consistency right, you don't really, you end up with a big mess,
And that's where it becomes, franchising to my mind, and I know you agree with this, is it's got to be a win-win for everybody.
Absolutely.
The franchisor and the franchisee both have to win.
Yeah.
And both have to understand what part the other one plays.
Absolutely.
And there is a part that each one of them play.
And the responsibility that goes with that. Isn't it?
Yeah.
So these are two different business models. The franchisor model is not the franchisee model.
Yeah, that's
despite the fact that the franchisor may have their own company-owned operations, those operations are similar. But the franchisor model is a completely different business model to what the franchisee one is.
Yeah, it's absolutely.
And the two working hand in hand with support and research development, brand development, positioning in the market space,
everything,
research, all of that kind of thing is what keeps good brands positioned and occupying and continuing to command space.
Yeah.
And you need a good franchisor that's well resourced to be able to do that. Yeah. So if you're not paying fees and you're not reinvesting, back into that structure, you've got a problem. So it's understanding what those, all those components,
what the dynamics do, and the mechanics of the business,
and the contributions that they make to the whole ecosystem. And the success of it all.
Yeah. I think we've covered it.
I think so too. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So before you go, and wander off to whatever it is you're doing later on today, there are some links below for the sort of guide that goes with this, the franchise guide, buying a franchise guide. There is a link, or there will be a link soon for the territory intelligence masterclass as well.
There will be.
But there's definitely a link below for our new the collective space. Go and have a look at that as well.
That's our franchise community. It's our online space that we've created for all sorts of from every aspect of franchising. So whether you're a franchisor or a franchisee or a potential buyer or a buyer or a
It's all
potential
there.
franchisee, or just a franchise professional out there. That's this is a space where everyone can learn from each other. It's all about educating everybody in the sector, and it's about making an impact that is positive and contributing to a sector that is really a huge contributor to the economies all over the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So if you are navigating any of the things that we've talked about today, if you want more information, then let us know. Obviously, all our details are below. Um, if the episode was useful to you, then we'd love you to share it. If you can share it with just one person, if you could subscribe to our channel and like the podcasts and videos that we're putting on there, that would be great.
Yeah.
We're going to do a lot more of these. Look out for
Yes.
what's coming. And it's goodbye from us.
Goodbye from us.
See you next time. When people buy